You join me today in a very small car indeed. It's another Suzuki, it's another tiny Suzuki, it's another rare tiny Suzuki. Yes, it's a Mk1 Alto from 1982. Did you know that the Suzuki Alto is now up to its 8th generation? No, I didn't know that either until I started reading up on them a couple of days ago. But this is the first one, which ran from 1979 till 1984, and this is a 1982 example. Now the Alto didn't start as the Alto, but as the Fronte or something, the SS40, a little tiny two-door, two-seater with a fold-up back seat for tax reasons van with a 539cc two-stroke engine. Now shortly afterwards, they then converted it into a proper car, changed the name to Alto. The Alto name had been used on export cars already, but then as the range grew into a passenger vehicle, Alto kind of stuck. The SS40 Fronte became the SS80 Alto. And here it is. It's tiny because it's a K car. I won't go into K car dimensions again, but needless to say, they are very small, and they means you can buy a parking space in Tokyo and that kind of thing. Now when the name finally changed to Alto in 1980, it gained a 543cc two-stroke engine, and ultimately in 1981 when it came to the UK, it went proper. It got a four-stroke at 796cc's of power from the little three-cylinder engine. Let's take a look at that now. Now getting into the bonnet is slightly unusual. You don't reach underneath and hunt for something. It's not like an American car where something pops out of the grille. You push the badge and up it comes, which is very civilised. And there's even a little strut somewhere I saw a minute ago. Here we go. Take the load off. Look at it. It's so tiny, it's so cute. I've got a lawnmower with a bigger engine than this at home. Now, being Suzuki, this is a pretty advanced little clever engine. It's an all-alloy cylinder head, it's a monoblock casting for the block, and it's got a 4-bearing crank, so even though it's only 3 cylinders, it's a smooth little unit, although it doesn't actually develop an awful lot of power. It only makes about 40 horsepower, which is not a lot. But even though the car is also extremely light, weighing only 631 kilograms, it gives it a 0 to 60 time of 19.1 seconds and a top speed of 87 miles an hour. However, the MPG is fantastic. It'll do about 56 to the gallon in combined economy mode, and for the early 80s, that's stratospherically good. But I just can't get over how tiny this whole thing is. Look, here's the what do you call it? Here's the starter motor hanging off the side of the engine, and the engine itself is just this little tiny shoebox here in the middle. It's so great. Even actually the fuel filter is almost as big as the starter motor. This is hilarious. Oh, this car is so cool. Now, being a small car, it's got small wheels, 12 inches, which is pretty diminutive, but not as diminutive as the JDM cars, because back in Japan, they were only 10 inches, up until they brought out a 4-wheel drive version called the Snowliner that got an extra 2.5 centimetres of ground clearance. Wow, it's tiny in here. It's so cute. It's like a toy car in this thing. It's brilliant. But of course, being a K car, it will be tiny, because they are tiny on the outside. They've got not much choice but being tiny on the inside as well. But they throw a lot of stuff in here to make it cool and well equipped. The brochure is quite proud of all the standard equipment you get on this car. So you get things like a radio, 2-speed wipers, a lock on both front doors, and that's just in the standard spec. That's not even going into the options list. The seats are really small, and you do kind of sink a fair way into them. I don't think they're particularly worn, as the car's only got 36,000 miles on it. Unusually for a car this small of this era, the seats do recline, they're not fixed in position, and they've got headrests as well, so safety has been taken into consideration. The steering wheel is so spindly, it's so tiny. The rim is just such a little tiny delicate thing with just a big, bold section in the centre. Now we need to do a horn test, of course. What did K car horns sound like in 1982? They sound like you need the keys. Lily, second time lucky, got a key now. Look at this thing, it's got Suzuki stamped in the metal. It's a little blade thing, which is so simple and nice. Right, interestingly, unlike a lot of Japanese cars, there's no button to push or anything you need to twist, as well as just turning the key to get the ignition on. There's double pushage here, so you can push on both thumbs and give extra clearing the road out of my way potential. Although the horn itself isn't that loud. It sounds more like a relay than a horn, to be honest. Ah, that's better. Need the engine running. That's quite a good sounding horn. I'll go with that. We've got a nice vinyl covered door card. Obviously, being an 80s car, you've still got plenty of exposed metal around the top of the door, the A post, even around the headlining and the ceiling and the B post. That's all painted metal body colour. But you've got a big vinyl thing with a few little details in them. No door pockets, of course. Keep fit windows. But you do have this rather funky little lock And at either corner of the dashboard, you've got these little eyeball vents, so you can just direct the air around you as you need. And it's a 3-speed fan as well. It's got recirculation, change the direction. This is all kind of good, expensive car stuff in a little tiny car. And bear in mind, when these were launched in 1979, okay, bear in mind it was the Fronte price I'm talking about here. In America, it was about $2,000. Ford at the time was about $5,000. The instrument binnacle is small but clear. You've got a speedo that goes up to 90 miles an hour. There's no digits beyond 80, and it kind of just ends at 140 kph on the kph dial on the inner ring. The owner says that 40 is a comfortable place to drive it, and 50 becomes terrifying, so I don't think it will have seen 80 particularly for very long. On the right hand side, you've got a big temperature gauge and a big fuel gauge, around the same kind of dimensions as the speedo, and down the centre, just your oil, charge, brake, handbrake, hazard light, warning lights. Speaking of the hazard lights, check out this little button here for turning them on and off. It's the cutest little thing ever. Pull it up rather than push it down, which is unusual. Just a little tiny plastic peg in the middle, and the little stalks here between the speedo and the steering wheel are straight out of the Whiz Kid. Of course, Japanese car of the 80s, your indicators are on the right hand side and your wipers are on the left. You also have a little tiny coin tray down here on the bottom below the eyeball vent, and over on the right you've got fog lights, rear fog lights as standard, and a heated rear windscreen as standard as well. This car was absolutely loaded. It was laughing at a Fiesta. The laughter continued in the centre section because you've got a radio as well. It's only medium wave, of course, and no cassette, but you've still got it. It's here. You can still listen to Radio Luxembourg. It's fine. There's a little lighter socket here, 12 volts, and what I guess might have been an ashtray on a more expensive version. Oh no, the ashtray's down here. It's just a little Suzuki plaque. And of course we have the fan control and the blowers, which we've mentioned already, and another little tray. There's lots of little storage trays, and up at the top of that, the big, most important feature of any car, the T-shelf. How do we fare with this? Oh, it's a nearly good T-shelf. It's plenty of room, but it's not quite tall enough. So what we need is a shorter cup. So we've got plenty of sandwiches, we can have biscuits, we can have a decent sized mug. Okay, a ceramic mug. I would recommend, if you're buying an Alto Series 1, get a mug, not a travel cup. That's my buying consumer advice. It's a 5 out of 10. Over on the left hand side, we've got a little glove box, which does have, it's a secondary T-shelf, but it's really only for thermos cups. It's tiny, tiny wee little things. And a little bit of space for gubbins. And another shelf down here. This car has got stuff for everything. This is quite cool. This is an advert from a German magazine from, I'm guessing, 1982 or 3, which says lots of things that are cool in German about Suzuki Altos. This one was brown, and he has a nice jumper. And apparently he's wearing coveralls. Maybe he's a decorator or a racing driver. There's no centre console behind the gear stick. It's completely open, as kind of basic cars tended to be back in the 70s and 80s. So lots of legroom, basically very open, very spacious. And a lot of the carpet was standard in the centre of the car. If you look at the sides of the sills and around the back of the pedals and where your feet go, it's actually a vinyl wrapping. It's quite basic but wipe clean. It is a rudimentary utilitarian car in some respects. Now here we've got a 4-speed manual, which is going to be good because it's Suzuki. It's a little bit vague, but I don't know if that's age or if that's how it came out of the factory. We'll take it for a drive in a minute and we'll find out. Then we've got a manual, proper old-fashioned handbrake, which I like. And we've got a big light here. Check out the size of this thing. Huge. Oh, and the kind of fabric in the headlining you have not seen since, well, 1982, frankly. It's very similar to, you know, Mark II Escorts and that kind of thing. Very cool, little perforated thing to, I don't know, get the sweat from the roof or your head or something, I don't know really. It just looked good at the time. A couple of sun visors, and that's kind of it really. Let's go look in the back seat. Now, not all Altos had the luxury of 5 doors. I'll put my foot on the seatbelt. In a lot of markets there were 3 doors as well. Now, although the access is a bit tight because the front seatbelt is right in the middle of the rear footwell, so as you get in and out you catch your feet on it every single time. The room itself isn't too bad. I mean, I've moved the seat forward a little bit so I've got some knee room. There's lots of room under the seat for your toes, and the headroom's pretty good because the car kind of stays fairly level and square right up until it gets to the corner of the ceiling. So it's not too bad in that respect. You've got lockable doors again, which is nice, and these have got child locks on as well in the back, so your little ones can't go for a dive when you're going around the corners. There's an ashtray on the left hand door, but not on the right hand door. There's no interior light for the rear seat passengers, and you've got a little door pull, and that's kind of it. as far as the rear seats go. It's the same kind of cool dogtooth tweed fabric. I'm a big fan of a tweed fabric in a car. Interestingly, where the rear wheel well cuts into the back of the seat, they've not put anything apart from like a padded vinyl-y plastic here to disguise the fact that there's metalwork intruding into the bodywork. There's no carpet, there's no sort of tweed fabric, there's nothing, just this black plasticky stuff, which is, I guess it's a budget choice really, isn't it? Now, like all Japanese cars, such as the Rover 200, there's a little tag by the driver's seat to open the boot. Now, I mentioned there's a 3-door and a 5-door option. If you went for the 3-door option, you got a full hatchback, but on the 5-door, I guess for structural rigidity, you only got the little glass hatch opening, like on a Whiz Kid. The boot isn't too bad, really. For considering how small the car is, this is actually quite a sizable boot, and you get split 50-50 folding seats as well. How cool is that? Now, the strut has gone, and finding parts for these cars is next to impossible, so I doubt a new one will be coming anytime soon. However, you do get a full-size spare wheel in this car, which is hidden under this little bit of carpet in the back. Now, this is the original, obviously, metal wheel, but I think it's an original tyre on it as well, judging by the state of it. Now, this is, obviously being a Kei car, a city car, and you'll notice I'm currently in a rural environment, and that's because this is the third location we've actually tried today to get this video shot. The first one was a college campus of a college that was shut for, obviously, the lockdown, but there were cameras and security everywhere, so we couldn't stay there. So we went to a railway station car park where there were cameras and parking charges and a strimmer, and so we wound up here in the most remote little place you can imagine. But it is quite good because it's so tiny. I mean, this thing is only 3.29 meters long and 1.41 meters wide, which is on the small side. So squeezing down little country lanes is not tricky. It's also 1.3 meters tall, which does almost make it square in terms of its dimensions looking from the end. It does have a manual choke as well. Now, 40 horsepower doesn't sound a lot, but it's actually not as sluggish as you'd imagine. It came with a driver's door mirror as standard, which is exciting. I believe the passenger mirror was optional on the base model and standard on higher models. So again, leading the way with decent equipment and levels of specification. The gear change is nice and light, and it's fairly easy to find gears on the 4-speed gearbox, but you do have to take it a little bit easy and just kind of rev match to get into the lower gears, otherwise it will graunch as you change. And it's got synchro mesh on all 4 gears, which was still a selling point in the early 80s and late 70s. And the steering, obviously not power assisted on a car as light as this, is very, very light. It's rack and pinion steering, so it's good and accurate. And do a quick GoPro change. Okay, this is the only part of this journey I'm nervous about, because I'm going to go over a level crossing with GoPros on the outside of the car, and I don't want to have to go and fish one of those out of the live rail. So taking that very slowly indeed. I think we've managed to keep all 3. So yeah, technically this is relatively an advanced car. So as I say, it's got the steering rack at the front, and it's also got disc brakes at the front as well. Only drums on the rear, but discs on the front on a car this size at this time was pretty advanced stuff. Suspension wise, again, it's more advanced at the front and the back, with independent front suspension with strut type coil suspension, but a beam axle and leaf springs at the rear. So it's a little bit bouncy at the back, nice and controlled at the front. They built these things in 3 factories around the world. Obviously in Suzuki's own plant in Kosai in Japan, then South Pacific Assemblers in New Zealand, in Wanguni I believe it was, assembled them at a rate of 6 a day from knockdown kits, and Maruti in Karachi, churning these out as the Maruti 400 at an astonishing rate. This is such a fun little buzzy car. As I mentioned earlier, the owner said going above 50 is a bit terrifying, and frankly I'm not too upset. I'm in rural roads with limited speed limits. Oh, that's a very cool MX-5 just there. So it's a Unos. It rides well, it's got decent visibility. The seat is actually pretty comfortable considering how thin the actual seat itself is, because they've had to make compromises in the amount of padding and things they can fit in the car in order just to get it into the car. So the rear padding of the seat is very, very thin indeed, and the seat squab itself is also very thin. Okay, road is closed here. Also, the turning circle, as I'm now discovering, is amazing! I can tell you exactly how big it is. The turning circle on this vehicle is 28 feet, 10 inches, or 8.8 meters. And I can believe that is very small indeed. This thing does handle relatively well. It scooches down at the corner. Being front-wheel drive, obviously there's no transmission tunnel taking space away from your feet, just a little hump for strength in the floor pan. Right, we're now in a de-restricted national limit zone, so we can push all the way to 50 miles an hour. We could potentially go to 60, but in top it doesn't really feel like it wants to accelerate very much more as there's a slight incline. Okay, yeah, 55. Actually, it's not that bad. It feels relatively stable at this kind of speed. It doesn't really feel like it wants to accelerate anymore, but the car itself feels nice and stable. And that's not bad, considering this is really a city car rather than a backroad storming machine. And it's still its original ride height suspension and all that kind of stuff. So this is like 38-year-old suspension on this car. Back to 40 miles an hour again. Oh, I've loved driving this thing. This is so cool. Oh look, this is a happenstance. This is a Mark 6 or 7 Alto. Just doing a 3-point turn in the road. What are the chances? I love all kinds of cars, everything from supercars to four-wheel drives, like proper four-wheel drives, to super saloons, but there is something just so much fun about a ridiculous car like this, which is just so tiny and so fun and so well thought out. This is the thing though with Suzuki cars. They're always 100% reliable, well 99.9% reliable, and they're always brilliantly thought out. You get decent equipment in a Suzuki, and you get brilliant build quality, and you get people who've thought about how it's going to go together and how everything's going to function properly. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed joining me in the ride in this astonishingly cool little thing. It's so tiny, but it packs. It's so tiny, but it punches way above its weight in terms of just cool factor. I've absolutely adored driving this hilarious little thing. I would go and hit eBay for an Alto Mark 1 right now, but apparently there are only 3 left in the UK, so maybe I won't at the moment. If you've enjoyed this, please do the usual things, like, subscribe, share on Facebook and everywhere else. You know the drill. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. It really is tiny. Oh my gosh. And if I'm going to do that again, but I'm going to reset the seat so it's not in your position.